Good afternoon, everybody. Pigskin Pete here. Happy Thursday to everybody. Today, I'm going to continue with the Pac-12 breakdown, and I'm going to get into the Pac-12 North. You know, after looking into the Pac-12 for these videos, the Pac-12 lost a lot of really good quarterback talent to the draft this year. However, the most interesting storylines to me have been the coaches. There's some very interesting coaches throughout the Pac-12. When you're talking, I already did the South. When you're talking about Chip Kelly, Herm Edwards, Kevin Sumlin, Clay Helton. Those are just an interesting group of coaches, and the Pac-12 North does not disappoint either. Without any further ado, let's get right into the North. We'll start with the bottom dwellers as usual. The Oregon State Beavers. Let's be real here, guys. Who doesn't want to see Oregon State play South Carolina? The Cocks versus the Beavers? Somebody's getting screwed. Oregon State has always been somewhat of a bottom dweller in the Pac-12 North, and I don't expect this year to be any different. They just can't compete in recruiting with the other teams up in that region when you're talking about Oregon and Washington State. So, you know, 5, 6, 7 wins is about what I expect from Oregon State, and that's pretty much all I can say about them. And that's pretty much all I have to say about that. Cal. Now, in recent years, Cal has not been a great team. But it's very interesting, some of the elite NFL talent that they produced in the past 15 years. All right, let's look at them real quick. Aaron Rodgers, future Hall of Famer. Marshawn Lynch, future Hall of Famer. Marshawn Lynch on that golf cart, though. Did you guys see that? Priceless. But again, kind of like Oregon State, if you're going to go play in the Pac-12 on the West Coast, there's about 6, 7 other teams, if you're a 4 or 5-star player, that you're more likely to go play at than Cal. So sorry, Cal, you're not going to win the North. Oregon Ducks. Oregon, another very interesting team. So they've had 3 head coaches now in 3 consecutive years, 3 different head coaches. Of course, the successor to Chip Kelly got fired after he had a couple of really bad seasons. They went out and got Willie Taggart last year. He coached 1 year there, won 7 games, and then hauled ass down to Florida State to take over that job. And now they just have hired Mario Cristobal. Oregon should just move their team to the state of Florida. That's where they get every coach from. Now, looking into him, he's a pretty interesting coach. So he played at the University of Miami in, I want to say, 1989 through 1992. And he's been a head coach at Florida International University for the past 4 or 5 years and has done really well there. So, you know, it's hard to say what he's going to do because it's hard to be a consistent winning football team and get yourself in the conversation to win your conference or even your division at this point when you're recycling coaches year in and year out. He's going to have to stay there for a few years. Good luck with that. The guy wins 8 games. He's taking a job somewhere else. Oregon has become a stepping stone instead of a destination program. How quickly the tides have turned. To get some stability and see what they can do. Now, they do attract a lot of really good talent. One reason is because their facilities in the Pac-12 are second to none. Of course, the guy that owns Nike sponsors all that, and they have great facilities. Practice fields. Everyone knows them for their crazy uniform. Feathers on the helmet, okay. Feathers on the uniform, I'm sorry, guys. Not a good look. You know, they started that whole sort of thing, but a lot of teams do that now, so it's not as much of a fad if you're a young kid who wants to wear these crazy uniforms to go to Oregon. And who really cares what uniform you're wearing? You just want to win, right? I mean, I don't care what kind of uniforms my players are wearing. I just want them to win. Now, Oregon has been one of these teams that, starting with Chip Kelly, that they recruit speed. When you put them on the field against an ACC or SEC or a Big Ten team, you can notice a big-time size difference in the players. Of course, they did beat Florida State 1 year in the playoff with speed over size. But I have noticed, just looking online, that they have been recruiting bigger players. And I think the reason they're doing that, particularly on the offensive and defensive lines, is, yeah, you need speed, but if you're going to compete, again, with elite programs eventually, you've got to have size up front. So they are heading in the right direction as far as getting size in there. They might as well change their name to the Honolulu Ducks. They've taken every player from the state of Hawaii other than Tua Tagovailoa. And who knows? That guy's going to need a couple, 2, 3 recruiting cycles for us to be able to take them seriously. Sorry, Oregon, this is not your year. Washington State. I love Mike Leach. Now, as a football coach, he's pretty good, but as an entertainment factor, he is a 11 out of 10. I mean, I could just put on a highlight reel of his press conferences, clips from it. I could watch that all day long. There's something weird about him. First of all, he's got a very dry sense of humor. He's very funny. He says things that we would consider to be, weird or outrageous. But to him, I think he's just being himself, which is what makes it even more interesting. So listen, I mean, he runs an air raid style offense, which is another thing about the Pac-12 that's when you look into it, it's kind of intriguing, is that they have so many different styles of play in that conference. You have air raid offenses between Washington and Washington State. You have pro style offenses, with Stanford. I mean, UCLA, Chip Kelly has invented his own style of football. It's called high school football. There's a lot of different things to prepare for when you're playing week in, week out in the Pac-12. I mean, it's just one week you could be playing Stanford, the next week you're playing Washington State. It's like the polar opposite styles of football. To be completely honest with you, I never know what to expect from Washington State year to year. Last year I was thinking, what, they're going to overtake Washington and win that division. Well, I mean, I don't know. Maybe it's because I like Mike Leach so much. You know what? I'm sorry, I can't pick Washington State this year as much as I love Mike Leach. Stanford. David Shaw is probably tied for, or at least second best coach in the Pac-12. Some people might argue with me and say that maybe even Mike Leach is, or certainly Chip Kelly. Well, we can't say Chip Kelly is yet because he hasn't coached in college in years, and he's at UCLA now. But, I mean, what David Shaw has done there is pretty spectacular. Now, they were a little bit underwhelming last year. They do tend to just churn out these all-purpose running backs into the NFL. Of course, they have Christian McCaffrey, and of course, they have Bryce Love now. I made a video, I guess a month or so ago, talking about Heisman hopefuls, and my pick to win the Heisman was Bryce Love. Now, that's not shocking news to anybody. Fake news. It's not some kind of great revelation that I'm so smart that I think that Bryce Love's going to win the Heisman. I'm pretty sure he's favored in Vegas to win the Heisman. And the reason I think that is when you're talking about running backs, obviously quarterbacks are more likely to win the Heisman than any other position because they touch the ball in every play. But when you have an all-purpose back, a guy who returns kicks, a guy who plays slot receiver, a guy who will run between the tackles and do other exotic plays out of the backfield, he's touching the ball so much that you can pad that stat sheet. And when you pad the stat sheet and get a lot of yards and touchdowns, then of course you're going to be considered for a Heisman, especially when you're as talented as Bryce Love is. The other thing about Stanford, I spoke on this a second ago, talking about different styles of play in the Pac-12. They are a very pro-style offense. They have a very SEC, ACC, Big Ten built type team. Big guys on offense and defense, run the ball. A lot of times they put their quarterback under center, which you don't see a lot in college football. So, year in, year out, you could get one or two results when you're playing against these high-flying spread teams. That might be the dumbest thing I've ever said. Of course there's only one of two results. You either win or you lose. If you have the talent to score a lot, even in that pro-style offense, then you can beat teams like that. But if you're outmatched with speed and skill by some of these other teams, then you're losing to people you probably shouldn't lose to. Very unpredictable team Stanford is. I don't know what to say. I would say that they probably have about a 50% chance, in my mind, to win the North. And then, literally, if they win the North, I'd say they have a 50% chance of winning the Pac-12. So I actually like Stanford. I like their coach. I like the way they play football. If I'm going to have to pick here, I can't pick Stanford as much as I want to. Washington Huskies. Now, they have been the up-and-coming team the past few years. Of course, they made the college football playoff a couple of years ago and got absolutely boat raced by Alabama. But, Chris Peterson is a top 10 coach in the country. There's no doubt about it. What he's done with Washington-type talent at Washington is nothing short of remarkable. Also, they have the best quarterback probably, they have the best quarterback in the Pac-12 this year. Jake Browning is 22 years old. He's a grown man. He's been playing in that system for years now. Him and JT Barrett have both been starting quarterbacks for like 10 years. He'll be a high draft pick coming out, when he enters the draft after this year. But there's no reason to say that Washington wouldn't be the favorite to win the Pac-12 this year, certainly the North. The only team I think that maybe can give them a run for their money and possibly challenge them would be Stanford. But if I had to put all my money on one of those two teams today, I'm putting it on Washington. And I'm putting it on Washington because they have Chris Peterson as head coach and because they have Jake Browning as their quarterback. It's pretty much that simple. So the only thing I would say, though, is that if Washington goes 11-1, 12-0, wins the Pac-12, gets into the playoff, can they compete with Alabama, Clemson, Auburn, Georgia, Ohio State, Michigan, any of these teams who could possibly get into the playoff, most likely, Penn State? So if I had to answer that question right now, my answer would be no, that they can't compete with any of those teams in the playoff. What Washington has done here is impressive, so it's not a knock on them. It's just the fact that they, from top to bottom, elite teams from other conferences, I just think that they're a little bit behind right now. Maybe that'll change here in the next few years. Who knows? Gotta look at the glass as half full here. But as of right now, I can't say that I take Washington seriously to win a playoff game, even if they get in there. So having said all that, that's my conclusion to the Pac-12. I have picked Washington to win the North and Southern Cal to win the South. And I'm going to pick Washington to win the whole thing in the Pac-12 championship game. We'll see if I'm right. I don't really care either way. We all know that, how I feel about the Pac-12. It's been fun looking into the Pac-12, though, I'm not going to lie. Have a great day. Pigskin Pete checking out.